UFC Fight Night, Max Holloway versus Arnold Allen takes place next weekend on Saturday. It starts at 5:30, early card at Kansas City for this event. I didn't do too good on the last event, 5-7. Actually got my first dislike on a video, so someone really hated my picks enough to go back and dislike the video. So I'll do better this week. But I'll start with the prelim opener as usual. Not that this is a very good fight to start. Jocelyn Edwards and Lucy Pudilova. I'm going to go with Lucy Pudilova. I'm not going to spend too much time breaking this down. Lucy's the better fighter. She has the grappling, and where Jocelyn Edwards struggles is in the grappling. Carol Rosa and Jessica Rose Clark in both those losses, she got taken down and controlled. And Jessica Rose Clark isn't really that good of a grappler anyway, like, to be honest, at all. So I think Lucy Pudilova can do the same. She's training out of SBG, Ireland. She's, as I can see, at least on her Instagram, she's been working a lot in her jiu-jitsu and her grappling. And I think Jocelyn Edwards, that's kind of where she struggles a little bit, or where she can get beat. And I think Lucy Pudilova will be able to exploit the grappling of Jocelyn Edwards to find a win. Next fight is Gaston Bolanos versus Aaron Phillips. And I'm taking Gaston Bolanos. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that name right. Some of these names are always hard to pronounce, but I'm going with Gaston. Gaston's a Muay Thai guy. He hits hard. He can really crack. For Aaron Phillips, he's been out for forever. His last fight was almost 3 years ago, and that was against Jack Shore in a fight he lost. But Jack Shore is really good, so you can't really hold that too much against him. But besides that, he hasn't really fought a good level of competition at all. He's beaten, regional level guys years ago and then loses to Jack Shore. Gaston's been fighting over in Bellator, and he's a guy that has some really crazy knockouts. And I mean, like, insane knockouts. And I really think he can find the knockout here on a guy, Aaron Phillips, who's been out of the game for a while. I think the UFC is setting up this fight for Gaston to win, giving him a guy that's been out for a long time, a guy that he could probably find a knockout over, and they'll put it into a highlight reel for him after this one, is what I'll go with. Bruna Brazil and Denise Gomez, the third fight in a row, which I'm not going to spend too much time on because the fight kind of sucks. Bruna Brazil is who I'm going to pick, though, the special one. She is actually pretty good. I mean, she found a head kick KO in her last fight. I'm not really impressed with Denise Gomez. I don't really think she's that great anywhere. She got beat everywhere by Loma Lookboonmee, who's actually a pretty solid fighter. I'll give her credit for that. Loma's not bad, but Denise Gomez got taken down basically and controlled at will. Loma landed some pretty good ground strikes on her as well. And she just didn't really look good in that fight whatsoever. Bruna Brazil, I feel like, will be better everywhere. She's a little bit bigger, and I just feel like she should be able to outstrike her, or if she needs to, stay on top in the grappling and win rounds that way. Finally, we get into a good fight, a fight that I'm actually interested in, and it's Lando Vannata and Daniel Zellhuber. I was actually considering Lando Vannata, picking him. The odds are very close. But I'm going to go with Daniel Zellhuber, and I understand how he looked against Trey Ogden is not, what you want to see. Him losing to Trey Ogden. But what you have to understand is the guy, it was his UFC debut. He's fighting an experienced fighter in Trey Ogden who's, has a high fight IQ, a lot of fights under his belt. I think Trey Ogden's like 32, 33. So he's been in there. He knows what he's doing. He stayed safe from, any power coming from Zellhuber, and he won the fight, right? And Zellhuber didn't really throw much that fight, which was kind of a problem. His output wasn't high enough. I think maybe the nerves got to him. That's probably the best guess, because he looked good on the Contender Series. His fight on the Contender Series against Lucas Almeida, very impressive. Very impressive. Not the first round. The first round, he didn't look really good at all. The first round, he got not beat up, but you can say he got beat up a little bit. He got outstruck badly in the first round by Lucas Almeida, but the second and third round, he came back and won the fight. And he looked really good in the second and third round, honestly. Like, he was, showing great head movement, landing some of his own shots, landing leg kicks, landing kicks to the body. He looked a lot better in the second and third round. I feel like for Orlando Venata, he might come out strong. He's been in the UFC for a long time. He's had, how many UFC fights has this guy had? So many. He's had 4, 6, and 2 in the UFC. So he's had a ton of UFC fights. Daniel Zellhuber, only his second UFC fight. But the way he looked on, in the Contender Series on that fight against Lucas Almeida, Almeida knocked out Mike Trezano, in the UFC. So we know Lucas Almeida is a good fighter. Zellhuber beat him, and showed he has a lot of skill against him. And then against Trey Ogden, like I said, he didn't really show up. But I really think this guy is a good prospect. As I mentioned, I think I was breaking him down. I was breaking him down in the last video I made because Trey Ogden fought last week. But I think, as I was saying, I thought Trey Ogden, his win over Daniel Zellhuber was more Daniel Zellhuber just not showing up and just Ogden being like I said, the more experienced guy, smart guy in there, not going to make any mistakes. I think in this fight, Venata makes mistakes. He certainly makes mistakes. He'll be open to get hit. I'm going with Daniel Zellhuber to get the job done. He's also training at Extreme Couture, good gym. I think this is a winnable fight for him in the second fight in the UFC. Next up is another one, Piera Rodriguez versus Jillian Robertson. And I'm actually going to go with Jillian Robertson. I'm going to go with Jillian Robertson because she's a much better grappler. And her wrestling isn't really that good. But I do think if she is able to take down Piera Rodriguez, it'll be bad news for Piera Rodriguez. And Piera Rodriguez hasn't really fought an excellent level of competition. If you look through her fights, I mean, her 2 fights in the UFC so far have been to Kay Hansen and Sam Hughes. And she actually got taken down by Kay Hansen in their fight. And Jillian Robertson, I feel like, is a lot better than Kay Hansen, especially, once she gets you down. I believe Jillian Robertson is very dangerous. Let me go back and try to find that Jillian Robertson. I believe she submitted Rose Namajunas in a minute at Fury Grappling, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I am mistaken. I thought I'm correct. Yeah, there it is. She submitted Rose Namajunas in 1 minute at Fury Grappling. So it's like, we know she's a good grappler. We know she's very dangerous once the fight hits the mat. And I just feel like Robertson will be able to get her down and could find the submission, as she does, has done against a lot of opponents. She has some losses mixed in there as well, but those are to JJ Aldrich, Miranda Maverick, and Talia Santos, 3 experienced, 2 good fighters, and JJ Aldrich is a decent fighter as well. So I'm not going to hold that too much against Jillian Robertson. I feel like, and she's a younger fighter too, a lot more experience in the UFC, better grappler, and in the younger fighter, I'll take Jillian Robertson in a close fight. Next up is Ed Herman and Zach Cummings. Oh, jeez, dude. Why is this fight? It's like the 2 drunk uncles fighting. No. In all seriousness, Ed Herman, UFC vet, got to respect them. Zach Cummings is a UFC vet as well. Respect to these guys. They've been doing it forever, so I'm not going to hate on them, but this really is 42 and 38 years old. Probably not, UFC level fight at this point in their careers, but maybe a while back, it would have been a much more entertaining fight. But a while back, Zach Cummings would have been at, welterweight or middleweight. So he's actually having his first fight at light heavyweight, Zach Cummings. He was a welterweight, and then I think he had 3 or 4 fights at middleweight, and he actually did pretty good at middleweight. And then now he's at light heavyweight after taking 2.5 years away from the sport. Fred Herman, he's been off for about a year and a half. His last fight loses to Alonzo Menifeld, who Alonzo Menifield's actually kind of good. Alonzo Menifield's not a bad fighter at all. His last fight, Menifield's, was against Jimmy Crute, and he nearly knocked out Jimmy Crute multiple times in their fight. So Alonzo Menifield's pretty good. And then he has 3 wins back to back to back before that against Mike Rodriguez, Kedis Ibragimov, and Patrick Cummins. So he hasn't really beaten an amazing level of competition, and then loses a split to John Vellante, which is an embarrassingly bad look, in all honesty. But for Zach Cummings, He's lost a few fights as well, but if you look through his record, he's only losing the pretty good competition. I'd say top 15, or throughout his career, he's only lost to like guys that are basically like top 15 level: Omari Akhmedov, Michel Prazeres, Santiago Ponzinibbio, and Gunnar Nelson. So all guys like at the time who were like top 15 level, or good enough to be around that level. Whereas Ed Herman's lost to a lot lower level of competition. The only worry I have for Zach Cummings is he is moving up in weight. So how's he going to look after so much time off? But I got to pick him to win here. Um, both guys have had a lot of time off. This isn't a fight that anyone should be, betting on. That'd be kind of crazy for someone to actually be confident enough to bet on either of these guys. But I will pick Zach Cummings to win. Next up is Brandon Royval and Matheus Nicolau. I'm gonna say Matheus Nicolau gets it done over Brandon Royval, and the worry, the main worry with Brandon Royval that I can bring up is, one, he's kind of chinny. That's certainly going to be an issue against Nicolau, who's kind of a sniper. He waits, picks his shots at a good time. So that's a little bit dangerous for him. Brandon Royval, he gets, he can get hurt and dropped, but he can also get taken down. He can get taken down. He can get rocked. Like, there's a few problems with Brandon Royval. He is a good scrapper in the sense that, he will throw heavy and he does have some power, and he has a good submission skill set, mainly the guillotine. He has won a few fights via guillotine, including against Kai Kara-France and in this fight against Matt Snell. So you gotta be worried, or not worried, you gotta be careful that you don't get caught in a guillotine against him if you do take him down or do look to grapple against him, because he is a dangerous grappler. He's not gonna just just lay on his back and just lay in guard, not do anything. He's gonna be active, gonna be looking to submit. But Matheus Nicolau, I think, will be a step ahead. He's a very smart fighter, very intelligent fighter. He's won a ton of fights in a row since he's been in the UFC. Won a split against Manel Kape, who I really think Manel Kape's one of the best in the division. I think he's very talented. So I do think very highly of that win, even though it was a split. Tim Elliott beats him, beats David Dvorak, he beat up David Dvorak actually in that fight. He beat up David Dvorak from pillar to post. Good win for him there. And then he knocks out Matt Snell. So he's looked better and better as his career has progressed. Matheus Nicolau. For Brandon Royval, you could say the same about him, but he hasn't really necessarily looked great in all of his fights. Like I said, he did submit Matt Snell, but Matt Snell rocked him before that and was on top of him, not controlling him necessarily. I mean, they were scrambling a bit, and that's how Royval ended up catching him in the guillotine. But before that fight, he wins a split against Rogerio Bontorin. He got taken down in that fight and controlled for a good portion of that fight as well. And then he gets submitted by Alexandre Pantoja and loses to Brand Moreno. Did get hurt in that fight, but regardless, I think as good as Royval is, I just think there's too many holes in his game that Matheus Nicolau can exploit. I think Nicolau, one thing he does very well is his movement. He moves a lot. He's not there to be hit. He's always moving, always looking to, find that opening. And I just think he's a very patient fighter. He's a smart fighter. And I think Royval will be the one that makes a mistake before Nicolau that can allow Nicolau to capitalize and possibly find a finish, or just win his way, or find a way to a win via a decision. Next up is TJ Brown versus Bill Algeo. I'm going with Bill Algeo. This is probably one of my more confident picks on the card. TJ Brown, look, after watching Shailon Nuerdanbeke's last fight against Steve Garcia, I put a lot less, what do you say? Not confidence, but I don't think as highly of Shailon after that fight, and the fact that TJ Brown just got dominated by him or lost to him clearly. Or he beats Eric Silva, but it's not like he was dominating that fight either. He was just, it was very grapple heavy approach, which I don't think he'll be able to do to Bill Algeo. Phil Algio is a very good grappler. Very good grappler, Algio is. And not only is he he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Not only that, he's also like pretty solid on the feet. He's very, you can call him like a little bit awkward on the feet. He has a stance where his hands are down and kind of like the karate-esque stance, but it's not like the typical like Wonder Boy like bouncing in and out. Like it's kind of a different style, but he does keep his hands down. It's a weird style, but it works for him a lot. He actually has some pretty good wins as well. Um, Joe Anderson breeds to Herbert Burns, loses a split to Andre Fili and Ricardo Ramos, and then beats by Carlisle to round out his last five. But for TJ Brown, if you look at his last five, Danny Chavez loses, wins a split decision against Kai Kamaka, beats Charles Rosa, loses to Shailon, as I mentioned, that doesn't look as good anymore, and then Eric Silva he beats. I just think Bill Algio's fought better competition. He's beaten better guys than TJ Brown, and I just think that this is a fight where he absolutely can win. I don't know. I don't think he'll finish TJ Brown, but I do think Bill Algio will certainly get it done, probably by a decision. But one of the more confident picks I have on the card, Bill Algio. And moving into the next fight, first fight on the main card, and this is one. This is probably my first or second, you might even say first most confident pick on the card here, and it's Rafa Garcia, to beat Clay Guida. Now, I like Clay Guida. Clay Guida is a legend of the game, absolute legend. Been in the UFC forever. 38-22. The amount of professional fights this guy's had is, insane. Over 60 professional fights. Just so many fights he's been in. But Clay Guida, at this point, 41, he's not the same guy he was. And even in his prime, he would lose a lot of fights just by making, bad decisions in the grappling, getting submitted. He's got submitted, I think, 11 times in his career. I don't think Rafa Garcia is going to be the one to, submit him. I don't necessarily see him winning that way. I just see Garcia winning by he could keep this on the feet and outstrike Guida. Guida gets lit up a lot. He didn't look amazing against Scott Holtzman, in my opinion, and that was Scott Holtzman who was retiring after that fight. Holtzman said that this was his last fight. After this, I'm done. And Guida, he won by a split. It's just, Guida, I understand he's, like I said, a legend of the game, all the respect to him, but I just think against the 28-year-old younger, hungrier fighter in Rafa Garcia, I don't think he's going to be able to get this one done. I don't think he's going to be able to use his just, unlimited cardio and just go berserk and get takedowns and all of that on Rafa Garcia. I just see Garcia just being, like I said, the younger guy, the guy that's landing the better shots on the feet, and I just see him winning this fight. I don't see Clay Guida winning this fight at all. Going with Rafa Garcia. Next fight is Pedro Munoz versus Chris Gutierrez. After watching Rob Font and Adrian Yanez last weekend, maybe I do want to pick the older guy that's been fighting the tough competition despite losing. Maybe I do want to pick him, but I'm not going to. I was thinking about it, but I can't. I can't pick Pedro Munoz. I'm going Chris Gutierrez just because I really think Chris Gutierrez is a pretty special talent. I mean, he's beaten a lot of like pretty decent guys. I mean, Cody Durden had a draw with him, beat Andre Ewell, Felipe Colares went to a split with him, but beat Dana Becquerel, and then beat Frankie Edgar. And that was a retiring Frankie Edgar. So, say what you will about that, but still wins against Frankie Edgar, still finishes him. And then against Pedro Munoz hasn't really looked the same. You could say he took the easy way out against Sean O'Malley. Some people say he took the easy way out. I mean, I'm not going to say personally that he quit because, it did look like he got poked in the eye. His eye probably was, he probably couldn't see out of it. So I'm not going to say that. However, a lot of people said, it wasn't People were calling it like it wasn't a legitimate eye poke, like it didn't like go into his eye, just scraped his eye, and he wanted out. However you think of that, regardless, that was his last fight, so it didn't leave a good impression on anyone 9 months ago. And before that, he's lost two in a row before to Dominic Cruz and Jose Aldo, who great fighters. Dominic Cruz a year ago, still not the same guy he once was. Good fighter, Dominic. Obviously, Dominic Cruz, legend, but even a year ago, he wasn't the same guy he was. And then against Jose Aldo, we know how good Jose Aldo is, so I'm not gonna hold that against him. But I just think Gutierrez is gonna be, the youth is on his side. He has power. He's gotten knockouts before. Pedro Munoz does have an amazing chin. I don't think Munoz is going to get knocked out, but I could see Gutierrez just winning a close decision. I'll say 29-28. Gutierrez wins. Training out of Factory X. Very good gym, by the way. Factory X actually has a lot of guys training out of there that are fighting on this card. I believe Dustin Jacoby, Chris Gutierrez. I'm not sure about Rafa Garcia, but I know Brandon Royval is training out of there as well. So quite a few, at least three, that are in the gym from Factory X for this card. So I do think Chris Gutierrez will be one of them from that gym that gets it done. Moving along, 4 fights to go. Ion Cutelaba versus Tanner Boser is next. This fight should absolutely not be on the main card over Matheus Nicolau and Brandon Royval. That fight should be on the main card. This should be on the prelims. I guess Dana really loves his big boys, but this fight, both of them coming off losses as well, just embarrassing. And by not putting 2 flyweight contenders on the main card, but putting these guys on the main card instead. Terrible decision from the UFC. Not that it surprises me at this point, but my pick is going to be Ion Cutelaba. Surprisingly, yeah, I know. The same Ion Cutelaba lost 3 in a row, but if you look at who he's lost to, Kennedy Nzechukwu, Johnny Walker, and Ryan Spann, then he beats Devin Clark and has a draw with Dustin Jacoby. For Tanner Boser, he's just not. Honestly, I don't see anything in Tanner Boser. I don't think he's really that great. He hasn't really beaten a great level of competition, in all honesty. Beat OSP a year and 8 months ago, but OSP was mentally checked out for a while now. Who did he lose his last fight to? OSP? I forget who he lost to, but some older guy from ATT anyway. So OSP's been checked out. Loses to Andre Arlovsky, like 40-something-year-old Arlovsky. Loses the split to Awir Latifi. Loses the split to Rodrigo Nascimento. Not a good fight. Shouldn't be on the main card. Again, I know I said it a million times, but I'm guessing the UFC thinks one of these guys is going to finish the other. And in that case, maybe that'll happen. I really don't even know. This is not a oh, this fight sucks. Yeah, I'll go with Cutelaba, but training out of a better gym as well. But not much to it. Both these guys kind of suck. Now we actually get some good fights to end the night. We actually had some pretty good fights on the rest of the main card, and even some on the prelims. But that fight sucks. This fight though is good. Dustin Jacoby and Azamat Mirzakhanov. Now I'm going to go with Dustin Jacoby here, but I am a little bit nervous about the pick. And the reason I'm nervous about the pick is because Azamat Mirzakhanov has had a few fights where he's not winning or he's not looking amazing. And then in the third round, he just boom, just a light, one punch or one knee against Stefan Nchukwi, which, by the way, getting beat for 2 rounds against Stefan Nchukwi and then having to come back and win by KO. Sure, you won by KO, but you were getting beat for 2 full rounds by Stefan Nchukwi. You were losing the fight. It was your first UFC fight, granted. So, first UFC fight, but still not a good look at all. He did get the win, so I'll give him that. And then he beats Devin Clark. Beats Devin Clark as well in the third round. So I'm a little bit concerned as far as like, okay, is he going to be able to do that to Dustin Jacoby? Because Dustin Jacoby is a good kickboxer. In fact, believe it or not, Dustin Jacoby actually fought Alex Pereira. He did. Dustin Jacoby fought Alex Pereira in kickboxing back in 2014. He got knocked out in the first round. You see all these kickboxing fights, right? And he hasn't lost. He hasn't really lost too many fights. Wins a lot of kickboxing fights, a few losses by decision. But the guy that knocks him out in 1 minute, Alex Pereira, just goes to show, how good Pereira really was, and really still is. And I guess it also goes to show how good Adesanya is at kickboxing as well. But as far as this fight goes, Jacoby been doing pretty good in the UFC. His last fight, a lot of people thought he won, lost against Khalil Roundtree. I think he wins this one. I think he wins this fight. I am worried about the power of Azamat Murzakanov. I'm worried about the power. He is like a one-punch kind of guy where all it takes is just if he connects on your chin, you're going to sleep. So, and Jacoby's been knocked out before. Like I said, it's a worry. This isn't one where I'm like really, really confident. Because I could absolutely see Azamat putting Dustin Jacoby's lights out, but I could also see Dustin Jacoby just piecing him up for 3 rounds, winning a decision. And he does have a huge reach advantage, 78-inch reach to 71-inch reach. That should be a huge advantage for the kickboxer in Jacoby. So I got to go Jacoby to win I'll say by decision. But would I be surprised if Azamat finds a huge left hand and just lands it on the chin of Dustin Jacoby? I would not be that surprised. Co-main event of the evening is Junior Edson Barboza and Billy Q. When I look at Billy Q, look through some of his fights, you look through his record and you're like, oh man, Billy Q, man, you're looking through and you're like, the record is he's beaten some guys, but you look and you're like, okay, Kyle Nelson beats him. Kyle Nelson's not the best. Loses to Gavin Tucker. Beats Gabriel Benitez. Again, not the greatest fighter. Good fighter. Like, these are good fighters, but not like amazing. Loses to Shane Burgos, who was a step up in competition. And then he beats Alexander Hernandez, who should never have been at featherweight. And Alexander Hernandez, cutting to featherweight, gassed out, was actually doing pretty good in the first round against Billy Q. And then on the other hand, you have Edson Barboza, right? Who, the last fight he was in, well, really last 2 fights, gets knocked out by Giga and then gets basically broken by Bryce Mitchell a year ago. And I mean broken. He got destroyed in that fight. Even on the feet, I'm pretty sure he got dropped as well. Like, he got destroyed in that fight. Wasn't even really close at all. It was a domination from Bryce Mitchell. We haven't seen something like that. Someone dominate Edson Barboza like that since Khabib. So, and we just saw how Bryce Mitchell got dealt with by Ilia Topuria. So, looking at it, you might think, all right, is Edson Barboza declining rapidly? 37 years old now at featherweight. Like, is he on the decline? And is Billy Q on the incline? Is that where are they kind of meeting in the middle? Like, Edson Barboza was at the top, he's going down. Billy Q starting to climb the ranks. It's a tough one. It's a really tough one. I was thinking, Billy Q, and this is probably one of the tougher ones for me to pick. I want to pick Billy Q, and I'm going to pick Billy Q, actually. I'm going to pick Billy Q only because he does have very good cardio. His cardio is the best part of his game. Whereas the cardio of Edson Barboza is lacking a little bit, or has lacked at least a little bit in the past. So, like I said, that is the worry I have for Edson. I think Edson's a really good fighter, really good striker. I just think it's, if this was a few years ago, I would probably pick Edson, but right now, I got to go with Billy Q to get it done. And then in the main event, it is Max Blessed Holloway versus Arnold Almighty Allen. I'm picking Max Holloway to get it done. I haven't seen Arnold Allen. As good as his record is, and as good as Arnold Allen is as a fighter, I really like Arnold Allen. I'm a fan of his, but like I said, I got to be unbiased here, and I got to pick the fighter I think is going to win, Max Holloway. Max Holloway has taken a ton of damage in his career. He's been in wars left and right, whereas Arnold Allen still, hasn't really been in the kind of wars, kind of 5 round drag him out fights that Holloway's been in. But I do think that will actually be an advantage to Holloway. I feel like Holloway will be able to dig deeper in the later rounds, knowing that he's been there. He's been in round 4 and round 5 where you got to push to get the win. And I just think he'll have a little bit more to give in those rounds than Arnold Allen. I think Max Holloway gets it done. By the way, the only losses in Max Holloway's career, I know he's 2-3 in his last 5. Those 3 losses were all to Alexander Volkanovski, who's considered one of the best. At this point, Alexander Volkanovski is one of the best of all time. Obviously not. I don't know where I would put him in the best of all time rankings. I definitely put him up there, not number 1, but I'd say maybe like top 10. Loses a very close decision to Islam Makhachev, beat pretty much everyone else in his career in the UFC. Amazing fighter. But Holloway, besides losing to Volkanovski, he only lost to Poirier and then loses way back to McGregor and then a split to Dennis Bermudez, then loses again to Poirier. But, as I mentioned, the only losses he's had are to, only a few to the very best of the best. Volkanovski, Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor. Those are not bad losses to have, especially, Conor McGregor, hungry, young Conor McGregor. You know what I mean? So Max Holloway's fought great level of competition. Arnold Allen has not at this point. His last win was actually when Calvin Kattar got hurt. Some people said he was on his way to winning the fight anyway, but Kattar did get hurt, so we didn't see how that would have played out. Dan Hooker was a fight before that a year ago. That was Dan Hooker at featherweight. Dan Hooker should never have been at featherweight. Beats him in the first round. Like I said, Hooker cutting way too much weight. Not a surprise that Allen beat him in that fight. Before that, he beat Sadiq Youssef, Nick Lentz, and Gilbert Melendez. Yeah, man, I just think this is too big of a step up for Arnold Allen. At this point in his career, I just think it's too big of a step up. He goes from fighting, from beating Calvin Kattar due to Kattar getting hurt, and then beating a completely drained Dan Hooker that should have never been at the weight class. Going from that to fighting Max Holloway, a guy that will be in your face for 5 rounds. He will not stop. I just don't think I really just I don't see Arnold Allen getting it done. I think and if he does get it done, he deserves a title shot. Arnold Allen, if he beats Max Holloway, give him the title shot. He deserves it. But I just see Max Holloway winning. I'll say by decision because Arnold Allen's a tough dude. And I do expect Arnold Allen to look good early, but Max Holloway, like I said, has been in a ton of 5-round fights, has the experience edge. I don't think is slowing down yet. I don't think he had a pretty bad loss to Volkanovski, got pretty much dominated, but that's Alexander Volkanovski, and he's only 31 still. For now, I'll say that Holloway still has it. He's still, one of the best, and I think he can beat Allen. So those are all my predictions for UFC Fight Night. Max Holloway versus Arnold Allen taking place in Kansas City. Should be a good event. Thank you guys for watching, and peace.